Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to the first session of self-improvement to the Quran. This is a series that we have started on the 1st of Ramadan, and inshallah we will continue right up till the end. The purpose is once again to connect ourselves to the Quran in this holy month. So, as you all know, that the reason for which the month of Ramadan was made specific to the for fasting was to express gratitude to the Almighty for the favor of the Quran being revealed to us in this month. So when we fast in this month, basically what we do is we express our gratitude, we express our thanks to the Almighty that He gave us this wonderful treasure of the Quran in this month, and therefore we exalt Him, we glorify Him, and we express this gratitude to Him that what He has done in this regard is something that is invaluable. As far as self-improvement to the Quran is concerned, dear viewers, the basic thing that we must realize before we even start off is that it's not that the Quran tells us about righteousness and what the right thing is in its original form, as if we are the first ones to know from the Quran what right and wrong are. So what the Quran does is that it only reminds us what we already know to be right or wrong. So basically, as you have seen the Quran calling itself as zikra, it calls itself as a reminder. So what the Quran does is it reminds us of the facts that we already have in ourselves. So it's nothing new which the Quran comes up with. It's divine language, the diction that it adopts, the forceful nature in which it presents its arguments, they are much like that reminder that we often find ourselves to be missing. So when the Quran tells us to speak the truth, when it tells us to be just, it's not that it is informing us for the first time regarding these realities. These realities are ingrained in us. We already know what truth is. We already know what justice is. And our own conscience tells us that we have to abide by these facts. So the Quran tells us that we have to pay heed to these things. So all that it does is it keeps on reminding us, it keeps on bringing us these facts and these realities. It tells us that as human beings, we have to qualify to a very high standard of morality. And if we are able to qualify for that high standard of morality, then of course, something which we have really learned in this month of Ramadan would be that we implement this in the rest of the year. So for the rest of the year, we have to be careful that whatever we learn in this month, whatever we practice in this month, has to be implemented and adopted. The portion of the Quran that we are going to study today is a very famous part of the Quran, especially it is something that all of us are aware of regarding personal development. This personal development, you will see, is reflected very deeply in the text that we are going to study at this instant. So I'm just going to share my screen with you regarding our first lesson, and these are verses from Surah Al-Furqan. So Surah Al-Furqan, these verses are from 63 to 71, and I'm just going to read out these verses before you and also translate them. So the words are وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And the servants of the Most Merciful are those who walk humbly on the earth, and when people in rage argue with them, they say peace and withdraw. So this is the first trait which is mentioned vis-a-vis the qualities which a person who professes faith in the Almighty is concerned. And remember how the Quran calls that person. He says that it says that he is Ibadur Rahman, he is amongst the servants of the Almighty, who serves Him, who is a person who would like to be admitted amongst God's favored ones. So the first thing which is mentioned is وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And the servants of the Most Merciful are those who walk humbly on the earth, and when people in rage argue with them, they say peace and withdraw. So we have to understand what the Quran is telling us here, that as far as arguing with people are concerned who are in rage, the servants of the Most Merciful, they don't engage with such people. In fact, the very first thing which is mentioned here is that they walk humbly on this earth. They do not in any way present themselves as arrogant people. The first thing that we see of a person when we witness him or her drawing close to ourselves is the way he or she would walk, the gait adopted. So the very first thing which the Quran tells us that these people, they are ones who walk humbly on the gate on the earth of the Almighty. They don't look arrogant. This arrogance is not found in them. They seem people who are absolutely down to earth, who know that as human beings they have been created by the Almighty, and once they have been created by the Almighty, what they need to do is recognize this principle that as human beings they can always falter, they can always make errors, but as far as considering themselves to be human beings is concerned, then they always repent, they always realize the mistake that they have made. So the first thing that we have to understand in this regard is that we as human beings, we have to be humble, we have to be down to earth. Humility is lands at the crux of human values. It is the opposite of arrogance, and any person who has arrogance is something who is disliked by all of us, and in fact he is disliked by the Almighty as well. The second thing which is mentioned in these verses regarding the traits of the people who would like to be called servants of the Almighty are ones who, when they are contested by people, who when they are contested by people in a fit of rage, if people in a fit of anger talk to them, they don't reply to them. They think that replying to people who are in rage will only worsen matters. What do? So the Quran tells us, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. All that they do is they say peace, salam, which means that I'm not interested, brother, in furthering this conversation, because it's only going to increase the bad blood or the bad taste that we are beginning to sense. And therefore, what they do is they just withdraw from that person. They just move away from that person, telling us that yes, it does hurt our ego. It does make us realize that yes, maybe we are in fear to the person because we have not answered him. But in fact, what the Almighty tells us that this is a way to win that person over, not only make him or her cool down in his or her temper, but at the same time realize that as individuals, when we are talking to such people who are in a fit of rage, who are in a fit of fury, then it's not worthwhile to answer. The best thing is to withdraw. The best thing is to call peace. The best thing is to tell them that this conversation is not going to be any more fruitful. What has been already been done is something that cannot be undone. But for further exchange, let us stop right here. So the second thing is that they just don't indulge in such debates. They don't do things which make worsen matters. Now let's go on to what the verse further subsequently tells us. It says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا. You can see the verse being displayed before you. وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. Now, another very beautiful trait which is mentioned regarding the servants of the Almighty is that they spend their nights prostrating before the Almighty. They spend their nights while standing before the Almighty. So remember that especially in this month of Ramadan, regarding which all of us have this opportunity now to spend the nights and the days in remembering the Almighty. Especially this is an advice that we can really pay heed to. So the words are that Wallazina, when they spend their time, it's not that they spend their time in all sorts of frivolous activities. So they spend their nights, Wallazina yabituna li rabbihim sujjadan wa qiyama, that they prostrate themselves and they stand in prayer before the Almighty at night. So this is a trait which is mentioned regarding servants of the Most Merciful, servants of God in general, in all parts of the year. But specifically today, since we have just started Ramadan, this has an even more special importance, and that is that before we commence our fast, before the end of Sehri, before the end of the Fajr time, the Sehri time, and as soon as we begin Fajr, just before that, we can offer those nafils at the time of the Tahajjud, and this is exactly what is implied. And therefore, if we are able to do the namaz and we are able to pray at that time, this it really brings us the blessings of the Almighty. We know from the Quran that this is the most blessed part of the day and night. In 24 hours, this is the time when the Almighty hears our pleadings, He hears our invocations, He hears our supplications, He pays attention the most because He sees that, well, we have made this effort to get up at that time of the night and we are able to present our supplications and our invocations to the Almighty. So the gist of connecting to the Almighty is that at this time of the night, we stand before Him, we prostrate before Him. And just to clarify, dear viewers, that this Taraweeh prayer that believers generally offer up with the Isha prayer, it's basically this Tahajjud prayer which the Almighty had made incumbent upon the Prophet, but not for the rest of the Muslims. For the rest of the Muslims, He had allowed them to read this Tahajjud prayer with the Isha prayer. So the witr that we read or we offer with the Tahajjud, with the Isha prayer are basically these nawafils of the Tahajjud prayer. So the best part today would be in the month of Ramadan, if we leave these witrs and we offer them, as I said, at the time of Sehri, so that we can partake the blessings of this blessed prayer of the Tahajjud. So this is something which we all would relish, that connecting to the Almighty at a time when He is the most attentive to us, when He is always looking for us, when He is there to accept our du'as, our invocations. This has to be realized, and if we can make this effort, obviously it's going to be really beneficial to us. We would feel as if we are in communion with God, as if we are talking to God, as if He is watching over us, as if we are in deep connection with Him. So you remember, at the base of all human connections, at the base of all human good deeds lies this strong God connection. The stronger this connection with God, the more we would be motivated to do righteousness, to do good things in life. And good things in life, of course, is something that we have to aim for all the time. Now let's move on to the next part of these verses. So we just studied the third trait, which is that وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا. And now it says وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. So it says that these are the people who say, save us from the torment of hell, for its punishment is ever clinging. Indeed, it is an evil abode and resting place. So their prayer is that, oh Lord, we are people who continue to do wrong. We are thankless to You. We make errors. And when we make these errors, we do some great mistakes which entitle us to the fire of hell. And as human beings, oh God, oh Almighty, please save us from the fire of hell so that we can live in peace, so that we are able to do what we have been destined to do. As human beings, all of us make errors. As human beings, all of us make mistakes. But what we learn from the Quran is that it's not the mistake or the sin which counts as much as our repentance after it. So if we are able to always regret, always feel ashamed of the bad things that we have done, and we return to the Almighty once again, this is something which the Almighty has said that He likes the most. He's like a shepherd who is always on the lookout for that odd goat that might have gone astray from the herd. And as soon as that odd goat comes back, he feels really happy, just as a shepherd would feel happy when some of his lost cattle come back to him. So the Almighty is always ready to forgive us. He's always there for answering our calls. But then we have to realize, dear viewers, that we have to ask for this forgiveness from the Almighty. We have to tell the Almighty. We have to bring forth our forceful supplications, and no better a month than the month of Ramadan. So remember, this month is a month of self-accountability. It is the month in which we must take stock of our lives. It is a month of meditation. It is a month of self-reflection. So spending more time with ourselves, spending more time in evaluating what we are doing wrong and what we are doing right, this is one of the best utilizations of this month. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has also said that this is a month of accountability, of self-accountability. That if we stand by night in a way that we hold ourselves accountable for what we are doing wrong, then we would be forgiven by the Almighty, provided that we make up for for the sins that we have done or for the mistakes that we have committed. So spending more time with ourselves, spending more time in reflection, spending more time in meditating, spending more time in reflecting that what needs to be corrected, what needs to be done in the right way. And then when we realize that we are doing something wrong, as these verses say, that God, please forgive us for our faults, please save us from the torment of the fire, because this is an ever-clinging torment. It's not going to diminish, and we would like your blessings in order that we be forgiven for this. And then, as you see that the verses go on, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا وَلَمْ يَقْتُرُوا وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا. So it's not just that they are spending their time worshipping the Almighty, prostrating before Him. One of the most coveted traits are that they are people who, when they spend, are neither extravagant nor miserly. I mean, they don't overspend and they are not miserly, but they are moderate between it, who invoke on no other deity besides God. So one of the next traits which is mentioned is that إِذَا أَنْفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا وَلَمْ يَقْتُرُوا, which means that when they spend, they do not cross the limits. I mean, neither on the side that they go on spending, they just don't realize that they have to stop, but at the same time, they are also not miserly. They're not stingy. They just don't tie their hands, but they are moderate. So remember, moderation is the name of the game. You have to be in between, neither overspend nor underspend. Always realize that the wealth you have is something which God has given you, in which the best part is that not only should we use this wealth for our own well-being, for our own upkeep, but also to share it with other people. And remember, we have told that the more we share it with other people, the more it's going to be beneficial to us. And as Prophet Jesus has beautifully said, that your heart is, I mean, your heart is something which is always with something you love a lot. So if you keep your money with God, your heart will be also with God, which would mean that you deposit your money, you spend your money in the bank of God, you place it there, and the Almighty has said that it will be returned to you manyfold. It will come back to you manyfold, and you'll realize that the treasures and the coffers of God, they are immeasurable. They are going to help us. But at the same time, neither should we be stingy and nor should we be overspending, in this case, what the Almighty has said here. And then, of course, the next part of these verses, that's even more something which it resonates with us today, with all these killings going on and the vandalism going on. So the verses say, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. So the first thing which is mentioned is that these are people who invoke no other deity besides God. What does this mean? I mean, of course, Muslims, they generally don't invoke deities other than God. We only worship God. But the thing is that without realizing at times, we are asking other people for a lot of benefits. We are going to saints, we are going to graves, we are going to all sorts of altars and making our prayer to them, to such people. So these are subtle forms of polytheism. These are subtle forms that we have to realize, that we have to worship the Almighty only. We must not go to anyone. And remember, the time of trial is the toughest of times. When we think that we are being tried, when we are in a spot of bother, and when things are not working the way we would like them to work, what do? We start going to other people. We start going to peers, to fakirs, to shuyukh, to saints, and we think that, well, they're going to solve our problem. So here lies the test of faith. God tells us that you have to trust Him in all circumstances, because you see, He is going to try and test us in this world in a way that we would never be able to gauge at times, but we have to trust Him. We might be tested through the loss of a very dear one. We might be tested through financial constraints. We might be tested through ailments and sicknesses, but this should not waver our trust in God. We should come closer to God even more in these circumstances. So remember, in normal circumstances, we always do what we are required to do. But in these telling circumstances, in which we are pushed, that we at times knock at the door of someone else. And it is here that we have to realize, no, we come what may, We have to knock the door of God always and not go to anyone else. So وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَٰهًا آخَرَ, and then it says وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. And they are the ones who never kill any other person, except, of course, on the basis of some pretext. For example, if they have killed someone, in return for that, the person who has killed would be presented as a person from whom qisas has to be taken, and that too by the state. But then what these verses tell us is that such is the sanctity of human life that they just don't think of taking human life. Wallazina, then they are the people who just cannot think that they could ever have any share in injuring people or even in killing them. And then, of course, as I said, these are the three major crimes which we people think they have been mentioned in the Quran, one after the other. So one of them is polytheism, the other one is murder or injury, and then finally is wala yaznun, they do not commit adultery. So remember, committing adultery, committing fornication, this is something which is also prohibited. And the family system which is envisaged by the Quran, the family system which we have been given by the Quran, is protecting this very, very important purpose of preserving the family itself. So when we indulge in extramarital relations, we are actually playing havoc with this institution. And that is the precise reason for which adultery and extramarital relations are forbidden. And the starting point of these extramarital relations, dear viewers, is our eye. These are eyes. They are our eyes. If we don't let them take undue liberty, if we don't stare at the opposite gender, if we guard our gazes, we will keep ourselves in check at the very start. We would nip the evil in the bud, so to speak. So in order to remain pure from inside, in order to remain protected from inside, it is essential that we always guard our gaze and not let them take undue liberty. If we are able to do that, the rest of the things, they are going to fall in their place, and believers would never be given this opportunity, or they will never find this opportunity to go as far as violate the sanctity of this institution by committing adultery. So this is another very important directive which has been given in this verse. And then it says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ يَلْقَ أَثَامًا. Yani, a person who does these things, he has to remember, this is not something ordinary. This is not something that is going to just stay like that. But the Quran says that a person who does these wrongs shall meet the consequences of his sins. And then on the day of judgment, his torment will increase. So it says, يُضَاعَفْ لَهُ الْعَذَابُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَيَخْلُدْ فِيهِ مُهَانًا. So on the day of judgment, his torment will increase gradually, and in disgrace he shall abide in it forever. So we once again turn to these verses, and they tell us that if we are people who are always floundering, we are always floundering these directives of the Almighty, we are always making excuse to bypass these directives, then remember, this is a fate that is destined to us. His torment will befall us on the day of judgment, and it's not going to be an ordinary torment. It's going to increase. It's like an ever-increasing gradient that will be faced. And yes, the Quran says there still is a way out of it. And what is that? إِلَّا مَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا فَأُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. Except those who repent, accept faith, and do righteous deeds, for them God will change their vices to virtues. Imagine what these verses have said. إِلَّا مَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. So the verses say people who repent, accept faith, and do righteous deeds. They once again accept the fact that they are people who have been made by the Almighty. They must profess faith in Him, do righteous deeds, and God says for them He will change their vices into virtues, which is like a bonus that we can all think of. So فَأُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. And God is merciful and forgiving. And then it says, وَمَنْ تَابَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَإِنَّهُ يَتُوبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَتَابًا. And he who repents and does righteous deeds in fact returns to God. So therefore, righteousness is something which brings us closer to God. It is something that brings us and makes us people who are now close to their Creator. So, my dear viewers, this brings me to an end for today's lesson. We have seen how beautifully the Quran reminds us of the realities that we always, we have this cognizance of these realities already in ourselves. We know that walking humbly on the earth, presenting ourselves as human beings, and at the same time realizing that we must not engage in aggression with people. We must give them the benefit of the doubt, as well as try to disentangle from any discussion and debate which might lead to extreme results. And then at the same time, we connect to the Almighty. We are always there to find a way towards Him, and we avoid these major sins. And as I just said earlier on, all these things are things which we already know of, whose heinousness we know of, and whose positivity at the same time we also know of. All that the Quran has done here today is to remind us of these facts and these realities. So, my dear viewers, if you have any questions regarding what we have discussed, or any other question that you'd like to pose, I'm available for answering.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad and dear participants. Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for the commencement of this series so that the Muslims could use these precious moments of Ramadan to reflect on Quran's message and take stock of themselves. What's better time to remind oneself to adopt dignity and humility by conducting themselves than this month? We will now have a brief question and answer session. Because it was the first session, we had a longer talk. Naveed Irfan, you may unmute your mic and ask the first question, please.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातहू। मेरा सवाल ये है कि जो तरावी की नमाज है, अगर मैं ये नमाज मतलब जो सहरी के पहले उठ के अगर तहज्जुद की ही नमाज पढ़ लूँ मैं, और रात को तरावी की नमाज ना पढूं, और उस वक्त मैं कुरान का मुताला करूँ, कुरान को समझ के और उस पर गौर व फिक्र करूँ, तो क्या ये बेहतर होगा, या मतलब कि तरावी की नमाज इज्तिमाइयत से पढूं वो बेहतर है?
We have to understand that as far as the Taraweeh prayer is concerned, it is basically the Tahajjud prayer which was allowed to be offered with the Isha prayer. So offering it with the Isha prayer is the second best option. The Prophet never did so. The earliest Muslims never did so. This is a practice which was actually instituted by Umar radhiyallahu anhu in his own rule, under his own rule. But all these personalities, all these righteous people, they offered this prayer at the Tahajjud time. So the best and the first option is that you are able to offer it at the Tahajjud time, as you said, and just before Sehri, if you can do it, this is its ideal time. Only when there is some time constraint, maybe, or some other issue at hand, that as a second option, yes, you can offer the Tahajjud prayer with the Isha prayer.
Ruhina Hashmi, you may unmute your mic now.
Thank you for the lecture, Dr. I have a very quick question, basically. You mentioned that it is important to spend time in Ibadah, specifically after Sahri time, before Fajr time, and even close to Maghrib time. But the reality is that, likewise, right now, I'm standing in the kitchen preparing iftari, and I don't think I'm the only woman to do so. Why is it such a difficult task to get through two people, two men, two families, that women have as much of a right of ibadah, of prayer, of seclusion as men do? Why is it assumed, and can we do anything about it? Why is it assumed that only whenever you say you should spend time in ibadah, you also mean me as a woman and not just the brothers here? Thank you.
This is a very sorry story, and I share your sentiments, and I truly feel sad that this happens, and unfortunately it's happening unchecked all over the globe. And we are the remnants, I would say, of this patriarchal society, that we have become people to whom male dominance and everything related to whether it's ibadah, whether it's sports, whether it is any other field in life, men generally receive that preference. And for this, I feel ashamed to be talking to you like this. I'm a member of their community, but I do think that this is basically neglect that has taken place on the part of husbands, on the part of fathers, on the part of brothers. So it's basically realizing, the brothers realizing, the fathers realizing, and all other male relatives realizing that women have an equal say, not only in matters of worship, they have an equal role in all other fields of life, and we have to make that happen for them, and try as best as we can to give them this opportunity and think that they are equal aspirants to what we think that we are also aspiring for. So all that I can offer at the moment is this. With this, I mean, I do feel sad, I do feel sorrowful, but I think all that what we need to do is make our next generation understand this, because perhaps making our current generation understand these issues might be difficult because of the fact that they've grown up with these issues, they have it as a baggage. But perhaps for the next generation that is growing up, our own children, our own grandchildren, if we can make the difference, we can make any change, that could happen by telling them and letting them know that their own sisters, their own daughters, their own mothers and wives, they should be given this equal opportunity. That's how I think if there is to be a change, it's going to happen by educating our next generation, and at best as we can, of course, at the same time trying in our own homes as well to make this topic a matter of discussion every now and then, and make the best out of it.
Nashaba Masin, you may ask the question.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर, मेरा क्वेश्चन फिदिया के बारे में है। जो हम रोजा ना रखने की फॉर्म में देते हैं, तो वो हमें किस तरह डिसाइड करना चाहिए कि कितना देना है? क्या हम जिस मुल्क में रह रहे हैं वहाँ उसके हिसाब से देंगे या पाकिस्तान के हिसाब से देंगे? और अगर आप फिदिया दे भी देते हैं, बीमारी की सूरत में आप रोजे नहीं रख सकते, तो क्या बाद में वो रोजा रखना मस्ट है फिर भी?
So fidya is to be given if you are never able to fast. I mean, in future, if you are not able to fast, then you have to. I mean, you just cannot because you're not able to make up for the missed fast. Then fidya is a substitute for that. And the amount of or the nature of calculation of fidya is the consumption of a day's food. So whatever you eat in one day, like 3 meals that you have in one day, just calculate their amount in currency. So what you can do is that you give that amount to any poor person, or you can feed any person with that day's meal. So the option is with you. Either you calculate the amount in currency, or you give the meal itself, the 3 meals of one day. And the extent or the nature of those meals should be the ones that we or you eat. The person who's giving the fidya, the standard that of the food should be the same as is cooked generally in your home.
अगर हम जिस तरह बाहर रहते हैं यूएस में, तो वहाँ का फिदिया डिफरेंट है, और हम अगर पाकिस्तान पैसे भेजते हैं तो वहाँ का फिदिया जो उलमा के मुताबिक कैलकुलेटेड है वो डिफरेंट है. तो
telling you the way that you calculate the fidya is regardless of where you're living. I mean, you have to calculate fidya regarding the amount of food that you consume in one day. What is the cost of the food that you consume one day? So it could be an X amount in the US, it could be a Y amount in Australia, it could be a Z amount in Pakistan and any other country. So it is a day's meal, I mean, the 3 meals that you have in a day, wherever you are living. So the meal you have in that day, you can give those 3 meals, or you convert those 3 meals into currency, the currency of your local currency, wherever you're living, and can give that money away as charity.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a wonderful lecture today. Inshallah, we'll see each other tomorrow.